There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that will lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of the comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. I do believe that leaders need to understand their core values because those are the values that are going to drive your behavior day in and day out. They're going to drive how you approach relationships, and they're going to affect the decisions you make, particularly in tough times. Now, they also give you a bottom line for when the calls are really hard, and they help you know what to say no to, and they help you stand your ground rather than just getting swept along by whatever is happening in the company at that moment of time. And lastly, clear values are really critical for helping you understand your authentic identity. Organizations ask for so much change. When you know what your core values are, you know what you're not willing to compromise on and where you can compromise. And when we talk about core values, I believe you need to get beyond saying the obvious, like I stand for honesty, customers, and trust. I hope that's something everybody agrees to and stands for, or maybe should stand for. So what we want to talk about today is how do you understand what your core values are? How do you know if you've got a good set or not a good set? What's the process look like to really uncover those? So my guest is Robert Glazer. Robert is passionate about helping individuals and organizations elevate their performance. He's the founder and chairman of the board of Acceleration Partners, which is a global leader in partnership marketing. They have won all sorts of awards as a company, including Glassdoor's Employee Choice Awards, Entrepreneur's Top Company Culture, Best Places to Work, Fortune's Small Medium-Sized Workplace. So I think that makes Robert uniquely qualified also to say, what does it take to lead in a good way? He's got an insight newsletter that he shares weekly called Friday Forward. He's the author of 7 books. The one we're talking about today, The Compass Within, a little story about the values that guide us. Robert, welcome to the conversation.
Wanda, thank you. And look, I don't have a lot to add there. You kind of nailed it all. So my intro, I agree with almost everything you said about values and work and how it relates.
Okay, so I gave my opinion. I do want to hear your opinion, but you got a lot doing. This is your 7th book. Why this book? Why did you care about this one?
This is honestly the work that I have been doing for about 10 years now that I've seen have the biggest impact. First, I did it for myself, and then I added it to a leadership training program at our company, and then I turned that curriculum into a course, and several thousand people took it and have sent me notes all around the world around the clarity it brought them. And then I always knew, I was like, well, I'm not going to get a lot of people to just jump into a course. Like I need a book, but I had this fear about this vision of writing this book called like On Values, and it was in Barnes and Nobles and no one would read it and everyone walked by it. It would be boring. And then I finally, through a variety of different things that confluence that came together, settled sort of on, hey, a parable might be a better way to show this. Because when I talk about core values, when I present my framework and the validator, and people that have agreed with the value of core values for a year and coaches, they're like, this is fundamentally different. We get this. Like, I've spoken to so many different audiences now, and ones that I thought they were going to be like, yeah, you're full of it. And it's really resonated with everyone, but I needed a way to get people to pay attention to it, and hence the parable format, which was both a challenge and rewarding at the same time.
Well, decades ago, we used to do lots of work as coaches and leadership trainers on developing values, and then it became kind of ho-hum. And I know I believe in the last 5 years, it's come back on the radar screen in a really good way. But we don't have good language or a good process for talking about it, for getting down to what matters, as opposed to the same old usual company values that are stated, engraved on the walls somewhere. So that's what I get so excited about in the book and in your process.
I'm loving everything you're saying. I mean, you're stealing my speech, which I start with, which is, look, I think one of the people, they hear core values and their eyes kind of roll in the back of their head. And the reason is that companies have kind of made a mockery of this with all of these one-word statements and all this stuff. And people, and I've seen companies, they roll it out and they're so excited and they have their acronym and we just did our core values partner. And I'm like, everyone's going to throw up on this. They're like, we're patient, articulate, real. Like it sounds like all the same Office space stuff, or the Office stuff. Pick your favorite there. So, but when you see amazing companies, and a few of them, maybe 1 or 2%, that have these really differentiated core values, they have systems to hire for them, reward on them, include them in their performance reviews, have all kinds of things, and people are talking about them all the time or calling them out, and you're like, wow, that's really different. Then we go over to the personal core value side. And as you said, a lot of coaches work with people. But if you go online and you Google core value exercise or whatever, you'll find 10 different lists of words that tell you to pick from these 1-letter words, and those are your values. And that is both horrible and wrong, advice and wrong. And it makes the words matter, because most of us, ironically, have made a lot of decisions based on our values, even though we can't articulate what they are. And my to me, it's a little like there's a field with an electric fence and it's invisible, right? And so you hit it and you get shocked. And so then you learn like, well, I'll stay away from there and I'll stay away from there. So you're kind of like, I think I'm in these It's a lot better to have clear articulation of here's what I value and here's the things that I should do. We know when our values are violated, that's the shock, and it feels really bad, and not kind of bounce off the wall. So I've seen a lot of people who, they have a lot of scars. They've gotten to the right answer. They have a lot of scars. My thing is, if you could actually have actionable core values that help you make better decisions about what to do and not to do and who to do it with and all those things, it's going to be a lot better and faster for you to get to some of the right answers.
Well, and I think when I need to walk away. I just think having that sense of what you are not going to compromise on is
your non-negotiables. That's the definition.
Right, and it's where you lead from your conscience, and I think it's how it drives courage. I mean, I just think it's underpinning for so many things we throw around as if they were an easy thing to do. Okay, so come back. I've given people loads of lists of values. I always say it's a starting point. Like, think about this, but it's got to be personal. What's wrong with starting with a list of words?
Yeah, so my definition, start at the definition of core values, the non-negotiable principles that guide your behavior and decisions. This comes up a lot. They're not the only thing that you value. They're just high enough on the stack where the red line kind of comes into place. Where you're like, look, these are not fungible or dependent or conditional. They're like required. And a couple of things about them. They're intrinsic, not aspirational. So they reflect who you are, not who you wish you were. A lot of people struggle with this concept. They think they want to be something to cure something that they're not. And we could get into that, and I can tell you what's actually going on. They're consistent. They show up across all areas of life, work, relationship, and personal decisions. And they're clarifying. They help you make better choices about who to spend time with, work with, where to live. So as a decision-making rubric, and it's something that should tell you, I should do this or I shouldn't do this, just one-word values don't work as a litmus test. Like, what is trust? How do I make a decision based on trust? If I have a value of lean into relationships, I could look at a situation and being like, what am I being asked to do here is build a community and build relationships. I would love that. What I'm asked to do here is be really transactional, and I don't want to do that. What did they tell me their value was last week? I zig when others zag. Another person I worked with, it was choose the familiar. And man, did they have stories of their entire life. And then they proudly pulled like an iPhone SE out with a button that I didn't even know what existed anymore. But their vacations were always the same. Like, it was very, like, things to them, like, they're very rewarding to have things that were familiar, and that impacted their workplace too, and how they work. So the thing is, okay, so that's the definition. If you look into them, most core values, they are formed in our childhood and adolescent years, probably by 20 years old, the vast majority. And when I sort of am nailing it down, and, Wanda, we're talking about something like, is this a value? And they go, oh, this is a strong value. I can almost always tie it to a for or against. If we go back to that formative years, there is something that was in your life, or usually a parent or something that you really resonated with strongly and you wanted to carry that forward. Or just as often, if not more, it was 180 degrees the other way. something happened and you were like, I will never do that or be that. And what happens is we're kind of these hardware systems without software. And so the software kind of develops as we ping off things and are formed. And our intuition around these things is formed before our reasoning and judgment is. So like, it's later that we kind of understand why we do it, but you just start to do it. And I just have had some real amazing epiphanous conversations with people because I'll say to them, like, which one? They're like, oh my God, like, yeah, it's definitely this. Like, you know, I'm a person that is all about credibility and show me that you're credible and whatever. And my dad was constantly rattling off things in an authoritative manner that weren't true and bullying everyone into, you know, his opinion. And those moments where it just comes together, where I really encourage people to go back and sit with this stuff. And I talk to them, where I differ from a therapist, like we're not in the remediation or discussion. I'm just in you got to understand that whatever that was, it's important to you. It shows up as your operating system as a 20, 30, 40, 50, 6-year-old in the workplace. It is a strength in a lot of cases. Tons of passion comes from pain, like including for me, a lot of things that I want to do were things that, you know, came from sort of painful experiences, but you got to understand that connection because especially in leadership or parenting, it is driving you whether you realize that you are not. So if you're in control of the bus, great. If someone else has the wheel and it's driving the bus, you are probably reacting to things and getting angry and you just don't realize why.
I couldn't agree with you more. Those critical events form what we think it means to lead, what kind of decisions are the right decisions, who we want to have around us. And as you say, they form that basis of what I'm going to do and not do, what I'm going to really stand for. Okay, and I get that you're saying one word doesn't do it. It needs to be a phrase, and I think you're implying it needs to be in your language too, not in some generic language. So we know what it really means, what it really stands for, and it has meaning to you. Did I get that right?
Yeah, so the two most common values that people tell me their values are, and I sort of kibosh both of them, is integrity and family. So let's dive into each of those as an example. First of all, integrity, many definitions, many more than you would think. So I would say to someone, integrity. Okay, did I have integrity yesterday? Like, what does it mean to you? What does that look like and feel like? Like, what is integrity? And for some people, it's telling the truth. For others, it's your words match your actions, which is different than telling the truth. And those people usually grew up in environments of hypocrisy. You know, for others, it's live your best self, you know, or live your highest intention. So there's actually like, you know, in harmony with what you're supposed to be doing. So whatever that answer is much closer to the value and it'll be more helpful for you. Similarly, in family, I don't know, how does family help me at work? How does family, like, it's not really actionable. How am I doing family well? Like, I don't know. Like, does that mean like tonight or in general? So again, I would sort of probe someone, you know, if you said that to Wanda, like, tell me what does family look to you? And you'll hear different things. It means you always show up and you're there and present. It means you take care of your people. Interestingly, like, and this sounds weird to say, that's not my definition of family. Because some of those people, those are like the family absolutists. Like, it doesn't matter what family does, like they're family. Like, and that is not how I view family. I'm not saying right or wrong. And so for some people, it's building community, right? And so whichever that underlying value is of family, and family might be a priority, that's going to give you a lot more clues to how you show up in your relationships, in your work, and the type of leader you are. Because if you're an always be there person, and you have a friend and they have a funeral for their dad and you're running around like crazy and you're like, should I go to the funeral? Yes, you should go to the funeral, because if that is your value, you'll deeply regret it. And I've been using that hypothetical example for a while in my keynotes, and someone came up to me after one of the keynotes and basically told me that story, like that it was real for them. They remember this funeral from 10 years ago that they didn't go to.
I love what you're saying, because I think we take common words like integrity or family or trust or collaboration, or pick whatever one of those, and they have what's the thing you're doing that represents that? What does that really mean to you? Because okay, it's easy to say collaboration. What's that really about?
Right. Do it together, right? Like, that's a better, someone to be like, look, do it, and I can look at all these choices. You know what? This activity, let's do it together. Like, And look, if I talk to the community people, the people who have sort of a deep community building thing, again, I'll ask that question, and you get one of two answers. They either grew up on a kibbutz or on a commune or somewhere where community was super strong, or they grew up super lonely. And they learned early on that like building community was how they ended their loneliness. And I'd say it's been more on the lonely. Like people who are really community builders, they're like, yeah, I had no people around me when I was younger.
I think that's consistent with some very old research at the Center for Creative Leadership, where they looked at what formed people's strongest behaviors as a leader. And often it's a negative reaction to a manager who had been an awful manager from their point of view. So I think it's sometimes the negative experiences that loom the largest. And you're saying the same thing here. Okay, so
can I before we jump on, can I comment on that point? Because I talk about that a lot. A lot of us as new managers and leaders have what I call a patchwork quilt style of leadership that is, I'm going to take all the great leaders like Wanda I had and all those people and do what they do. And then I'm going to do the opposite of all those horrible leaders that I had. What both of those things have in common is they are not authentically you. They are doing the good parts of someone else that may not feel right to you, and the opposite of something. Now that opposite might have really pissed you off because it crossed the value. But this is where you'd be a better leader if you were like, here are my values. I'm going to authentically lead from that. I'm going to share that with my team about this is what's most important to me. That's how you move on from the patchwork quilt.
Right. And then you're turning it into something that is true of you and that you really stand for and mean and are willing to do day in and day out regardless, as opposed to this is a behavior I'm going to try and, oh, well, that didn't work for that person. Never mind, reject that behavior. Okay. Couldn't agree more. All right. So we don't want a one word. We want a phrase, a thing that is a real definition, not a generic, and that has meaning to us. And that's probably tied to something in our very early life. Either somebody did or somebody didn't do, and it becomes a core, all right? And then you said that these are things that are non-negotiable. They guide decisions. They're required, not optional. They're intrinsic, not aspirational. We're consistent about them in all parts of life, and they really help clarify who we are, what we want to do, how we want to do. Now, talk to me a little bit about this intrinsic side as opposed to aspirational. You said people get that wrong.
Yeah. People think they want to like pick a value to fix something that they want to be better about themselves, and that's not a value, right? That is, it might be related to a value. You might have a value of always be improving, and so that's what you're trying to do. But people would be like, "But I was different then, or I have different things going on now." And my answer is, other than the data is pretty clear. Other than a pretty traumatic formative experience, usually health or relationship later on, these are formed kind of early. So if you're having that agitas, one of three things is probably true. One, you haven't identified the right core values for you, right? Because they're the things that you're kind of doing automatically, not that you want to be. Two, like you might actually just not be living one of your values, and you're feeling that dissonance and you're frustrated, right? You're an include all perspectives person, and you've been in an environment for a while where you don't work with a team and don't ask any opinions, and so you're like frustrated by that. The third is you've had a change in priorities, maybe even priorities in your value, because they have a hierarchy. But if I think about the application of my values, it's certainly different as a 40-year-old than as a 20-year-old. But because someone was saying like, one of my values is sort of long-term orientation and the other's kind of finding a better way. I had a different view of what those were, and achievement in 20s that I've sort of in late 40s have come to view that differently. I don't think the value has changed. I think how I look at it and what I think is better is basically changed. Back then I thought working 100 hours a week was better. Now I have a little bit of a different viewpoint.
I can see that the way you exercise that value, the way you practice that value, your shades of gray around what falls in and out of that value might shift with time. I want to talk about priorities, because I know several people who speak about values talk about the importance of understanding the priority. What's number one? What's number two? Number three? Do you agree with that statement? Is that an important exercise? The
priority of values?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, I call it it's like 202, 303 work once you have the values. But knowing your hierarchy and knowing it like in the laboratory before you go into the real world is super helpful. Because frankly, the hardest decisions are when your values contradict each other. It's like asking you to choose between your children. We had someone do this exercise and they had two values. Look, some of them take a little more imagination to see what the class. This one doesn't. Do no harm and always tell the truth. So it's not very hard to see where that runs into I had two examples. A work one. Someone on your team makes a fireable offense. You're the only one to know about it. What do you do? Or your friend's partner is cheating on them and you find out about it. What do you do? And when you ask people in the hypothetical, it's really hard in the real. Then they can think through it and they're like, no. I tell the truth until it does harm. And then I won't do harm. So I'm not going to tell her that person's cheating on her. Like I'll give her clues and whatever. Or they're very clear and they're like, no. Like I will not lie. And so I avoid harm. So people, they know which one, but it's helpful to know that before you have the thing, because when you see someone really struggling, it usually is because it is a decision that clashes their values against each other. It's literally like asking you to choose which child you love more. But in this case, there is a correct answer. And the way you would do that is if you had your list of 3 or 4 values, you can play little tournaments against each other, right? And like, okay, these two, this one wins. These two, this one wins. And eventually you have a champion.
Hierarchy.
Yeah.
All right. So how many values do you think most people have? 1, 2, 3, 5, 10? What do you think the number is?
In terms of core, I'd rather see people at 3 or 4 in terms of remembering those and making those the more important. Again, there's a lot more things that we value, right? And there's a lot more things that are important to us. But I have 5, but I'd rather see people with a really clean, good 3 or 4 that they remember than 5 that they don't.
Okay. All right. So now I got to go to how. All right. I buy the argument. I bought it before, but I now buy your argument about this notion of the core values, what the essence of those are about, where they're formed, why they matter, how they get in conflict with each other in terms of priorities. Now, where do I start? What do I do to develop these values and understand them?
If only there was a book that could help
if
people.
If only there was a book.
I always joke there's that scene with Richard Dreyfuss in that movie, What About Bob? And he's counseling him and he's like, there's a book I think that could help you. And he turns around and his entire bookcase is all like his book. Yeah. He's like, if only I could find that book. So look, you could read the book but we'll talk about the 6 questions. This is where the process starts. And if we don't have time for all of them, I've put them up at robertglazer.com/6 with a little video on how to fill them out. But these are the questions that start getting the data that we use for your core values. And they're meant to like take 6 pieces of paper and like answer them with everything that comes to mind and kind of go deep about it. So it runs from simpler ones like in what professional roles or jobs did you do your best work? And again, the answer is not like at McDonald's. The answer would be like when I was left alone to flip burgers and I had autonomy. Like it's what about the work was really uplifting? What are the words? What was the environment? We go deeper into this is one I like. What help, advice, or qualities do others come to you for? Like, what do they come to you for help with? That's sort of your superpower. We have the kind of deep one that gets right to the heart. What would you like said about you in your eulogy? And then we have a couple anti-questions. And look, the best test of a value is that the anti-value, the opposite of it, really bothers you. We could play this game with you if you want to do it, because I've done it with a lot of hosts. It's been interesting. But like, what qualities in other people do you struggle with the most? And so in that list, you're going to look at what they are, and then you're going to start to be like, well, what is the opposite of that? And then you're going to start to see probably the opposite that matches with a lot of these answers to your other questions.
All right. I suppose we could play that game. That's how you have my brain turning.
All right. So look, what's funny is when people answer this, they start with, when I'm like, well, what behaviors really bother you? They're like, you know what I don't like? And then as they start to say it, they're like, I hate that. And their face gets, so it's like they're trying to like make like it's not a big deal. So if you thought about an interaction or behavior, what's something you just can't stand when people display?
So when there's an overly transactional, I'm only about the transaction, don't care about the relationship.
Yeah. So
that shouldn't surprise anybody.
Right. So if there's someone at a party and they're just trying to like get your card. I was once at a conference. Let's test this. I was once at a conference, and it was a marketing conference, and there were a lot of people trying to get people emails. And the guy came up to me and he was like, "Are you selling Russian mobile traffic or whatever?" And I was like, "No, definitely not." Okay. Are you doing this? No. Okay. Can I get your card? I was like, hell no. Like, you're going to sell my email address. Like, he tried, and then he just went right for the, like, can I have your email address? And so, you're laughing on that. Like, I assume right. So you probably, relationships are important to you. Relationships matter, some sort of value around that has a relationship context in it, and really avoid people that are overly transactional. In fact, probably with vendors and stuff like that, like if they don't take some time. Yeah. So
the worst,
those of you who can't see Wanda's face, you're seeing, she's proving my point with a visceral reaction. When I get this right, people respond physically before I even hear their answer. So I don't know what it is, but there's a vendor she has in mind that there's a story that she's probably going to tell that just popped into her head.
Exactly. There you go. And I'm going to do that really, really quickly. Those inbound emails or LinkedIn direct messages where they say, "Hey, I've been perusing your, website," and they haven't been perusing your website because the next question wouldn't be asked if you had looked at my website. Yeah, delete.
Disingenuous, right? So you can hear the anger there. So look, we've got one of Wanda's values.
Yeah, I get it. So I'm going to ask a series of questions. I'm going to look at the kind of work I was doing, what I was doing in that work that I really most enjoyed. I'm going to look at, I forgot what your second question was, but I love the antithesis. What's the opposite? What is it that really annoys me? I can imagine you could also look at the times of work when I was my least happy.
Correct.
And
that's
what
one of
was
the
it
questions.
about
Why were you
that work?
disengaged? Why were you miserable? What were you doing?
Yeah.
Again, for you, it was probably like, hey, here's a yellow pages and go call people and like try to sell them. Yeah. Like,
no, never.
Right. You can just it's amazing. Just the physical reaction to, I'm not going to do something that transactional. Well, that's just not who I am. Right.
Oh, I've had charities ask me to do that, and I volunteered to do it. Never, ever again. I hate it. I despise it. You're right about that one. Okay, so just hit the 6 questions. So I've done 3 of them. What are the other 3?
The other 3 are I'll go through the whole order. So what non-work environments are you highly engaged, and what does that look like sort of outside of work? And what professional roles did you do your best work? What help, advice, or qualities do others come to you for? What would you want said about in your eulogy? You guessed this one. When were you disengaged in a personal or professional setting, and what did that look like? And then what are the qualities in other people that you struggle with the most? So if you had 6 full pages on that stuff, that is the raw material of the themes. And then it comes to the thing about my process that's really different, which is the core validator. And I think people who've done this work for a long time, they're like, this is the thing that will not let you get to a one-word core value. So you got to take what you would do is you would take the answers to all those questions. You would then start grouping the themes. So like maybe a red pen. What are all the things that sound the same? I put them on a new piece of paper. Maybe you come out with 3, 4, 5 themes with the opposites on the theme, right? So if it's all about generosity, then I hate people that are not generous, right? Those would kind of get grouped there so you can kind of see what the opposite looks like. And then the way you get a theme into a value, and look, I'm making this sound really easy, and everyone keeps looking for the half-hour version of finding your values. But if you really want to do this work, you're gonna have to spend a little bit of time on it. The first 2 questions of the validator are try to get the right theme. So can I use this concept to make a decision, past or present? If the most important thing about a value is your ability to like make a good decision with it, it's got to be a concept like our relationships or using relationships or entering a relate. Like, it's very obvious to me. Like I should do something like that has a relationship component or not have a relationship component, but make sure that it's specific enough. And then the second question is, again, let's test this theme. When you imagine the opposite of it, does it strike a nerve? So this is again, your kryptonite. It should be uncomfortable. As you heard, you get that agitas. I don't like that. I don't want to do that. So that's the right theme. And it's important, the cart for the horse. Like, don't worry about the right label until you have the right theme. So if it drives you crazy and you can make a decision on it, it's a good theme. And then the phrase is it a phrase rather than a word? Because that forces you to be more specific as to what it was. And then in that wording, could you objectively rate yourself on it? So this is where yours would be like, choose relationships or lean into the relationship or whatever. And then you could be like, I am doing that, or I'm not doing that, or that situation offers that. It doesn't. If I just say relationships, it's not as clear, right? So could you objectively rate yourself? I argued with a nonprofit years ago that wanted, this test actually works for corporate core values. They wanted celebrate diversity as their core value. And I was like, you're never going to say that in like a normal sentence. You're never going to be like, Wanda, yesterday on that sales call, you did not celebrate diversity with a prospect. Like, you just like, it's so awkward, right? Like, but you might say you didn't ask questions. You didn't look to solve differences. You weren't curious. You didn't include all perspectives, like, or whatever thing that sort of gets to the root of diversity. But it's got to be something you can see yourself saying in a normal sentence in order to know whether it's a real thing.
Great. I love that. I love this notion that it's a phrase I would use. I would evaluate my performance. I would evaluate a conversation. I would evaluate a year based on how well I did this. And I would use that phrase to say, I didn't do X particularly well. I think that's really lovely. And I think the whole notion of the opposite is absolutely brilliant.
Everyone loves that. It's so much fun.
So it's obvious. It's so obvious once you see it and go through it. All right. And then can I use it to make a decision? And is it a phrase, not a word, so that it really has some meaning to me, some language I would normally use? Excellent. All right, so I've got the theme. I've done the core validator. Am I done? Is that it?
Now you got to take it out on the road. So you got some draft core values. You take them out on the road. You test them. I suggest you write them down, put them on your desk, and look for 3 things over the next couple weeks or months. 1, I've got a decision to make, and I'm struggling with it. Do I look down at that list and I'm like, oh, a couple of these things could really help me, with that decision. Like, oh, that's really helpful. I have a great conversation. I meet someone I love. I'm engaged in my work. All this stuff. I look down. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? Checked out. I was in this like really meaningful discussion and relationship with someone and this and that. And then the opposite. I was super frustrated. I was annoyed. This person bothered me. Can I look down at that list and do I see a lot of opposites there? And that might let you tweak the wording, right? Maybe I had relationships matter before and I realized that it's actually choose relationships. Like, I'm happiest when I choose the relationship and points when I don't, or I lean into, like, you tweak it. So you're like, oh, and then eventually, you'll have a good list and you can move into that hierarchy and you can start to remember it and you can start to, use it to make decisions. Everything when I think about, I was getting annoyed recently because someone was like, it was a better way thing, and it was a long-term orientation. They were like, should I do A or B? And I was like, or no, it was, should I get this test or I not get this test? And I'm like, what does the test involve? Well, I'm at the doctor's. Well, it's like, it's free. And they just like prick me and it can rule out this other thing. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you do that? Like, I don't, this is the better way. Like, isn't that obviously like if you're telling me that there's a $4,000 test and they think that, it may, but it was just such a visceral thing for me that obviously that is the right long-term decision, and it's just a better choice because there's no downside. So when people ask me, that's what I know. People ask me my opinion on a lot of things, decisions where, like, should I do something? And there's literally no downside to doing it. And I'm like, well, why? I don't understand why you wouldn't do it. Like, I don't understand why we're having this discussion.
So I look at, I love that one. I'm looking at this in terms of a hierarchy, and I'm looking at it in terms of, does this really help me make a decision? And are there things here that are driving those decisions, or like the tough decisions, not the ones that have no downside, the ones where I kind of can weigh both sides of the equation and not sure which direction. That's when your values should illuminate.
Yeah, and that the one we talk about, the big 3 in the book, that the most important decisions, right? So your partner, your job, which could be what you do or where you choose to do in your community. I think the people that have started this work, and I always say, I think the thing that they weren't, the community could be where you live or where you spend your time, or the people. they realize like the most that they have not thought about their community and the alignment and where they spend their time, right? So Wanda, you love Utah, let's say, and the view. And so you move to Utah and you go get a place out in this desolate place, and then you realize they're not neighbors near you and stuff, and there's no community. And then you're like, but I loved Utah and I loved the view. Why aren't I happy? You might need to move a town over with the same view into a community where people get together and they do stuff, right? And so that is I think a lot of people has sort of forgot about the community alignment. Yeah.
You nailed me on that one. It's not Utah. It's New Mexico. If anybody is curious about this one, I do love it there, but I got to be close to people. So I have to have a way of interacting with people. Absolutely, totally nailed it for me. If I didn't have those two, it's not going to work. Absolutely not work. But that's consistent
so you like
with my
warm
relationship.
And community. Yeah.
I like beautiful scenery and community. Absolutely, totally. Okay, Robert, I love this. So core values, again, are non-negotiable. They're going to guide your decisions on the big decisions as well. They're required. It's not an optional thing. They're intrinsic, not something I'm aspiring to be or think I should be. They're consistent in all parts of my life and probably consistent over time as well. And they help me clarify what really matters and what I really want to be doing. Probably formed by childhood. And takes a little bit of effort to look through and say, not a list of words and pick some fancy words that sound great and make a poster that you're proud to show to other people, but real phrases that have real meaning to you, that talk about what you do and how you do them, and a bit unique to you, but explain what it means, as opposed to a phrase that we don't know what it means.
They're not things that anyone could say the same thing, right? You might have someone has an element of one of them, but like you're not going to meet someone who has the exact same DNA. It's sort of the equivalent. Yeah.
Same. And there's a hierarchy. I want to be aware of what the hierarchy is and recognize the hierarchy may change over time, but probably the values themselves are not changing short of a major traumatic event. And we've got these lovely 6 questions then that help you identify the themes. And then from the themes, I'm looking for these 6 questions to road test, does this really work? You call it a core validation, but and I love the process for that. And then road test it. Does it really work? Does it help me decide?
It's super easy. It should be done by the end of the day.
No, the description is easy. The work itself, I can imagine, takes a while because I think it takes a bunch of reiteration. I think
and this is, like I said before, I've loved doing this work with people. It took me 6 months to do this. It took me years to get it aligned. I wrote a book. I built a course. I have tried so hard to make this easier for people, but kind of in the world we are today and in companies, it's how do I do it faster? How do I not spend the 2 hours and I'm like, look, if you want to figure out the core underlying things that are driving you and stuff, like it's going to be the course itself. I always tell people is an hour, but the work's not an hour. It requires some thinking and some doing and some testing but if you spend time on this, it's one of the more rewarding things you'll do.
Well, I think also I've seen so many times when leaders do some version of understanding what they're really about as a leader. What is it that has formed me? What am I about? What do I stand for? I think what they're doing in that work is phenomenally going back to the core values. What are my essential core values? And telling the formative stories that fit around those core values. And it makes for an incredibly compelling presentation of who you are and what you're about that I think people really, really appreciate and enjoy, especially working with you. But more importantly, I think it gives you clarity on what you stand for.
Yeah, authenticity.
I just think that's
just
really
I am who I am as a leader. Here's who I am. Here are my red lines. Here's what's going to piss me off. Here's what I like. I mean, it's just your default sense of where you'd want to operate.
And I think it's part of the North Compass and the purpose and a sense of ethics. They are all kind of wound up in that one somehow for me. All right, Robert, you said people could get the 6 questions at robertglazer.com/6.
SIX, yep.
SIX. And if people wanted to reach out to you, where should they reach you?
Sure. Yeah. They can go to robertglazer.com. They can hit the contact thing. I respond to every note that people send to me that is not transactional spam. But if they want to have a conversation or they have a question, I literally always reply. So you can test me.
Okay. All right. I love that. It's fantastic, Robert. What a great conversation. I love it. I love the work. Please keep going because all of us desperately need a methodology that has more substance than what has existed up to this point in time.
Thank you
all
so
right.
much, Wendy.
So my guest, Robert Glazer, the book is called The Compass Within. And join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone. If you'd like to watch this and see my facial expression, check out our YouTube channel, Out of the Comfort Pod. And you can watch me in live color. See you next week.
Thank you for joining us today. Tune in for another edition next week with Dr. Wanda Wallace on the Voice America Business Channel. Reach outside your comfort zone this week.